Okay, right. We've been lucky so far. Technically, this has worked. This is where it gets tricky because we now invite 25 teachers live on air over the next hour and a half. Starting with at 6:50 exactly, Miss Flipping. Calling Miss Flipping. You're going to need to turn your camera on, Miss Flipping. It is turned on. It doesn't. Oh, we've got our first technical issue. I can't see Miss Flipping.
It says it's on.
It says it's on. Well,
as well.
Okay, I may have to put a placeholder in for you, Miss Flipping. So, Miss Flipping, introduce yourself and tell us which subjects you are and ask you a question.
Hello, so yes, I'm Miss Flipping and I teach social sciences here in the sixth form, sociology, psychology, and our brand new course this year, the Criminology diploma. Psychology and sociology we teach at AS and A level, and then obviously the new course with the diploma. So happy to answer some questions.
To log off, please. Thanks.
Hello. Hello.
I am still here, Miss Flipping. Sorry. So the first question is, it's a new course. What is criminology? What is criminology?
So really, I suppose you would call it the scientific study of crime. It's obviously very specialist because it is focusing on motives and theories that explain criminal behaviour. But we also consider the criminal justice system as well and how criminal cases go through the different stages within the criminal justice system to the final outcome. So it's focusing on a variety of elements, aspects of crime, motives and theories, but also focusing on the role that the media has to play in terms of developing a perception of crime and how it's reported as well.
Thanks, Miss Flipping. A question here. You teach both psychology and sociology, both really popular subjects at A level. Yep. But what is the difference between psychology and sociology?
Right. Well, psychology is the study of individual human behaviour. So what we do in psychology, we consider it's really why people think that the way that they do. We look at different behaviours and what internal influences encourage said behaviour as well as external forces as well. Sociology is a little different because it's focusing more on rules, norms, values, expectations, customs and beliefs in society and how they shape societal behaviours rather than focusing on individual motives. So psychology is a scientific study of human thought processes and the mind and behaviour, whereas with sociology, we've got that societal integration and what happens when people do conform to laws and norms and what happens when they don't.
Thank you, Miss Flipping. Why study? What sort of careers? Sorry, let me start again. What subjects work well with psychology? So if you're choosing psychology, what other subjects would be a good choice to go with them?
Yeah. So many of our students will study another social science along psychology, so obviously historically sociology, but actually psychology lends itself to a whole plethora of subjects. We have students who study psychology in conjunction with biology, with English, we have history students who study psychology, drama students, really a whole range because psychology is about human behaviour. So it really does lend itself to a whole variety of subjects. We've got mathematical components, scientific components, as well as the essay writing in the subject as well.
And a key question that sixth formers ask is, and I know the answer to it, will there be lots of homework?
Yes, the homework is set consistently between the teachers within the department, but you will be given time to obviously prepare for the homework. It's something that we will set in advance. You will have support with that work as well as resources to help you complete the work. So yes, it's set frequently and consistently, but you are supported with that process.
And thinking about careers, what do they lead on to? What does psychology and sociology lead on to?
Again, it's a bit like the subject combination. With social sciences, you could find that you end up in a whole range of different careers. People face it, working with people, you know, it's all about people, these subjects. So we have students who have considered careers in research as a result, students who have considered careers working in the public sector, perhaps working in the police, the criminal justice system, thinking about probation. We've had students who have gone on to study law as well, because of obviously the links with sociology and psychology as well there. Really, any career where you're working with people, going into teaching, going into any kind of support capacity, social care as well, all of those careers would be possible with a background in social sciences.
Thank you, Ms. Flipping. Final question that's come in, which I think I can answer quite quickly, because we at 6:55 is, can you do an AS in any of these? And I think the answer is you can do an AS.
Yes, in psychology and sociology it is possible to do an AS, yes.
Ms. Flipping, thank you so much. We move on at 6:55 and I can see them waiting in the wings in the green room. Going live now, history and politics. Miss Harbidge is on the left, Miss Mace is on the right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Can we ask you, Miss Harbidge, how similar is history A-level to GCSE?
The joy of A-level history is there are only two types of question that you have to answer. So at GCSE, there are loads of different types of questions with different structures and different ways. A-level, there's two. You all write an essay and you do a source question. It's so much easier. But the skills you've learnt at GCSE, the analysis and the arguing from the essays, they're the same. Some of the source skills we use, exactly the same. But you've only got two types of structure to learn. So actually the GCSE beautifully melds itself into the A-level, but without the complicated, horrid little pink booklets of this is how you structure every type of question under the sun.
Are you really saying that your pink booklets are horrible? I don't believe it for a second.
I think the students feel they are when they have to learn everything in them.
Can you study history at A-level if you haven't done it at GCSE?
Yes. Actually, obviously it's useful to have it for GCSE, but we've had some really successful students in the past who have not done it for GCSE, so don't let that put you off. And actually the content we're doing is very different from what we do at GCSE, so that won't affect you really at all.
And does politics and history work together? So you're in the same department. Do students do both? And for you, Miss Mace, how does politics differ to history?
So for politics, it does work really quite nicely with history. We look at the development of rights, the development of certain freedoms throughout history and throughout time. So elements of history are interwoven into politics, especially the other side of the A-level history, where we look at the making of modern Britain. That also has a lot of overlap because we have to look at key political figures such as Margaret Thatcher. So there's a little bit of overlap, but we also look at it in a very different perspective. We look at it more just to do with the political focus, whereas history will look at it to do with a more economic and social look as well.
So we have a lot of students who do both and they really like the way they go together, but we have quite a few students who don't do both and it makes not much difference.
Thank you. So a question has just come in. What periods in history are studied at A-level history?
So we do 3 for A-level history. There's my part of the course, which is the Crusades. So right back to medieval times, castles, knights, a little bit of cannibalism. It's just brilliant and I love it. And then a totally unrelated part, the making of modern Britain from 1950 through to 2007, which many of us online right now will be going, but that's my life. So they don't, it's almost like doing separate A-levels, which actually students really like. And then we do coursework on the African-American civil rights movement. So they write a big long essay and they really get stuck into this fascinating period of history and explore it. So yeah, 3 topics, that's it.
So I was going to ask about coursework in both history and politics. How much coursework is there?
1 essay for history, 4,500 words, which seems like a lot, but when you're writing it is not enough and you need more words, and it's 20% of the course. Otherwise, the other 2 modules go all the way through 12 and 13, and we start the coursework at the end of year 12, and my year 13s are writing it as we speak.
And for politics, there is no coursework. Nice and simple.
Easy.
But lots of debates in politics.
Oh, of course, yes.
And in history.
Yeah.
So many debates. We love a debate.
OK. Does politics link with any other subjects, Miss Mace?
Yes, it does. It links with a wide variety of subjects. So we often find it has quite a large link with English, for example, and some of the other social sciences that Ms. Flipping has also mentioned. History, also in year 13, politics, it has quite a lot of overlap with geography, looking at the global side of politics, about how life, poverty, human rights, the environment changes due to that as well.
Okay, Miss Mace, Miss Harbish, if you could give us a wave, thank you very much for joining us from the M Block today. And as the clock rolls over to 7 o'clock, calling Mr. Burgess and geography. Are you there, Mr. Burgess?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Perfect. Question here. Is A-level geography more physical or more human geography?
Entirely a 50-50 split, taught by myself and by Mrs. Starkey. Yeah, entirely you look at Earth's life support systems, coastal areas and various different system things to do with that. We look at tectonics and various things to do with hazards on the physical side. We look at human rights with myself. We look at global migration, the well-titled Changing Spaces, Making Places, which is very much a kind of a drawdown from what you would study at degree level, and yeah, a couple of other bits and pieces within that. You obviously do have, as you've just heard, for those who listen to history, there is also a coursework element, which forms a portion of 20% of your A-level, but you would make the decision about whether you wanted that to be physical geography or human geography. So, you know, your teaching is 50-50, but then you've got that added split on that element.
Earlier on, Mr. Burgess, we heard some students mentioning about the geography geography field trip. Can you tell us a little bit about the trips that you would go on at geography year 12 and 13?
So yeah, we obviously run. We need to prepare students ultimately for field work. So one of the really big parts of the geography course is, as you say, field trips. We undertake a couple of optional ones. We run one through Mrs. Starkey to the Jurassic Coast, and that really is a great trip. Long day, but a really nice one. And similarly, I run a visit to various locations in London to explore how they have changed over time, and you know, the nature of who and what they represent to geographers and what we can study. We go to the Gower for that's South Wales, for those that don't know, in not far from Swansea, which is a beautiful part of the world. We've been very blessed with wonderful weather for the last couple of years. And yeah, again, we stay there for a week, undertaking all sorts of different types of fieldwork practice. We do have wider trips, but you don't have to have done A-level geography to do that, but it is beneficial. We do give first preference to geographers, but we run the trip to Iceland, which is yeah, again really excellent, led by Mrs. Starkey, and yeah, any student kind of through Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 is able to do that. But yes, it is often taken up with year 12s and year 13s, and they absolutely love it. It's a really wonderful visit.
I think when you mention all of these trips, it just does remind you that there is a world after COVID, because these trips are absolutely fantastic. Absolutely. They're so enriching, aren't they? Yeah, a question here, I think about the sorts of questions there might be. What mix of essay and shorter answer questions are there when you're sort of like thinking about what sort of things do students have to write?
So there is, as you say, very much a mix of shorter and longer answer questions. In particular, the work that the students would study during year 12 lead themselves to the more shorter answer and the kind of the prep essays, if you will, kind of maximum of 16-mark essays, which are based kind of half and half on content and then the young person's ability to kind of analyze things. But as they progress into year 13, as they mature, as their style of writing and so on develop, as their minds develop as well, we do the debates paper. Do have a look in the prospectus if you want information about the specifics splits. But yeah, we do the geographical debates. For human geography, we do disease dilemmas, for example, and that does contain 33 mark essays, which, you know, you're looking, if you're just going to break it down into sheer volume, you're looking at probably about 2 sides as a kind of minimum, as a quality response to those sorts of questions. So it is a mix of shorter and kind of middle, but there are a number of essays that you have to do, particularly in that third exam, which would be the third that you do if you were to be sitting them in year 13.
Mr. Burgess, thank you very much. And not a single question about colouring in at all, but I couldn't help but mention it.
What job you do, Valentine? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mrs. Schofield, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce the next segment of the Q&A.
That's fantastic. And I can see in the wings we've got Mr. Fido, who heads up our computer science. So, Mr. Fido, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Good evening. Yes, Mr. Fido here. I'm the head of computer science.
Lovely. Picking up some questions for you here, Mr. Fido. The first one that seems to come up a lot is, do students have to do computer science at GCSE in order to do A-level?
The answer is no. I mean, it would absolutely be advantageous if you had done computer science, but no, you don't have to have done that in order to study it at A-level. What I would emphasise, though, is that maths is embedded throughout our curriculum, and I would like to see a good grade 5 in maths at GCSE, but you don't have to have studied it at GCSE to study it at A-level.
And just as you've mentioned it, sir, could you clarify, to get the grade 5 at GCSE for maths, does it matter whether you've taken foundation or higher? You can get 5 in either.
No, I mean, really, I just want to emphasise that the maths is throughout the subject. So if you're weaker at maths, you might find some of the more technical side of computer science a challenge, but it's not a requirement, no.
Okay, then a broader sort of question for you, Mr. Fido. What sort of avenues can you go down if you get an A-level in computer science?
It's tremendous to think of the world today as where we are. And we look around at how quickly computer scientists have had to evolve and adapt and bring together technology that's really enabled us to continue to work. So to answer the question, where can it take you? It can take you absolutely anywhere. There's a great saying by computer scientists that to know what the future is, you have to create it. And computer scientists pretty much create that world as we go through the digital evolution, the revolution. So the skills that we learn, you might want to be looking at town planning, for example. So we have the computational thinking skills, we have the skills that we break down a problem. Town planners could be one of those. But equally, you could use those skills in surgery. You know, how do I methodically think about the steps that I have to take in order to undertake the heart surgery, for example? The skills that you learn in computer science, very much applicable to that. Obviously, the computing route, software developers, absolutely. Law, you know, critical thinking, you know, you could go into law, into healthcare, into logistics. Really, it's a tremendous subject to have that opens up many, many subjects, not just programming, but across a wide field of careers.
That's super. Sounds very exciting. And then somebody who's obviously into technology has asked this one. They want to know which programming languages they get to use.
Fantastic. So this is coming towards, as part of your A-level, 20% of that is a programming project, and it is an in-depth programming project. And it really depends on what you want to do. So some of my subjects, some of my students right now are developing games, and they have chosen a programming language that is suitable for game and application development in that world. Some are doing sort of personally, they find timetabling an issue, so they're creating their own timetable app. Another one's got this fantastic idea of doing face recognition. There's all this video out there that hasn't been catalogued, so can I catalogue that? And maths, you know, another maths-based subject. So to answer the question, you will choose a programming language that applies itself to the project that you're working on, be that object-orientated or procedural or mobile-based. OCR, who's our exam board, have a number of languages that are approved, so the C family, Java, Python is very popular. You might be looking at some of the mobile platforms as well. Fundamentally, we can pretty much check with the board to say that we can use that programming language in order to develop that, but it's really what's suitable for the application that you're developing.
And within the department, have we got the skills to support all those coding languages? We don't have the skills to do in depth on all of those, because actually we haven't had those. But what we do have is the skills to actually teach how to program. And once you've understood how to program, you can take those skills and those concepts into those other languages.
Myself as the head of computer science and my colleague, Mr. Higgins, we both come from industry. We both come from enterprise ID. So I come from the software side, he comes from the hardware side. And what we're looking at doing is actually splitting, and we will be doing this, is we're going to split. So Mr. Higgins will teach the hardware component side, the networking side, that's his engineering background, and I come from the software side, so I'll be teaching the programming side and the theory side for the project. So absolutely, rest assured we have the skills and the capability within the department to cover that.
That's fantastic. There is so much information about this course. I wish we had 10 minutes. We've just got 1 minute left, so I'm going to pick out 1 or 2 short questions that have come through. One of them says, does it matter if my written skills aren't very good?
You haven't seen my handwriting. It doesn't matter, no. I mean, one of the benefits of the computer is that helps you to nudge you in the right direction. You know, we've got some great AI capabilities now. So no, your written skills not necessarily. You have to be precise. If you're not precise in your creation of your programs, it's not going to run. So that logical thinking absolutely is key. But no, the handwriting, the written skills isn't really a key criteria.
Okay, Mr. Fido, that was super. I'm going to have to stop you there because we've got our product design slot waiting. If people have more questions for Mr. Fido, you can ask him, or if you're not in the Willink, you can email us and we'll get answers to you. Thanks, Mr. Fido. Okay, lovely. I think we've got Mr. Downing now. Are you there, Mr. Downing?
With myself and Mrs. Jones, who also teaches the course as well.
That's lovely. Well, I've got quite a few questions for you, so let's get cracking straight away. The question that seems to come up the most is, what does product design lead to? Where to next?
So product design can lead you anywhere. You could go towards engineering, architecture, product design, of course. We see lots of people go away and do applied mechanical engineering and apprenticeships, as well as university degrees, and just straight up getting a job in manufacturing or design.
Okay, fantastic. And then, how much coursework is there, Mrs. Jones?
Okay, so there's 50% coursework, which we spread over quite a long period of time, over about 9 months. In year 12, we do a starter project to build up all those coursework skills, but it's a piece of coursework where you choose your own client, so you can focus it on where your skills are, where your interests are, and then you can obviously use any sort of material and specialism to develop it in the way you want. So learn things like project management skills and things like that, as well as learn your practical skills.
Okay, and are students allowed to make their own choices about what they make for their major project, Mr. Downing?
The entire thing is self-driven, so we set in the first year a couple of manufacturing tasks or design tasks that need to be completed, but after that it's design what you want for a particular client. So it's not necessarily always what you actually want, but more what the client needs. But other than that, it's open and they're able to do whatever they like.
It's really good because it allows you to focus it on what you want to do afterwards. If you love architecture, you can focus it on doing an architectural model. If you like the more engineering side, you can make something more mechanical or focus more on the maths side of things. So you can really tailor it to where your interests are and what you might like to study afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. So the world's their oyster, basically.
It certainly is, Mrs. Schofield.
That is wonderful. Now, students wanting to know, they like the sound of product design. Do they need to have done design and technology at GCSE?
Absolutely not. We've got, I think, is it 3 students at the moment who haven't done it, and they are flying through. They're doing very, very well. It does help to have a little bit of a basis in maths. So if you're able to do maths, there is a unit in the exam and in the coursework that's mathematical, about 15–20%. But other than that, if you haven't done it, we can catch you up. And so far, we've seen no real effect for not having done it.
Okay, and so is there a maths entry requirement for the course?
No.
I would say around about level 5. When we sort of spoke to the maths department, the maths in the exam at A2, so in the second year, is around about sort of level 6, level 7, as far as we've been told by Mr. John. So therefore, if you can be at level 5, then we can just build you up from that. That would be great.
Okay, that sounds super. Now, somebody here wants to know if they can use CAD/CAM for their major project.
Yes, they can. They can absolutely do the whole thing using the lasers, the 3D printers that we have, using a program called Fusion 360, which is professional level computer-aided design software. They do have to get into the workshops and make a little, but the whole project can be very, very CAD/CAM driven.
Okay, good. And then we're almost out of time. So one last short question for you. Is it possible to take it at AS level, or do you have to go all the way through to A level?
It's much better if you do choose it to whole A level. We have had one student do it as AS before, but it's very, very hard work and very time consuming. So if you were considering it, you would have to put in a lot of extra hours outside of lesson time, because you still have to do the whole major project, and you still have an exam fit at the end as well.
That's great. Mr. Downing, Mrs. Jones, going to have to stop there. I think we could ask a lot more questions of you, but thank you for your time. I'm going to move on now to the science department. I think we've got 3 science teachers tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, I think that was Dr. Kellaway and Mr. Davis.
Correct, yeah.
And we had Mrs. Presswood as well.
Yes, good evening.
Hello, everybody.
And also we have Mrs. Weeks joining us as well.
Excellent. That's super. Well, I'm going to start with a question about applied science. Do universities recognise the grades from applied science? Dr. Kellaway.
Definitely yes. From my own experience as a parent at the moment, I would say that universities are very keen on people with this qualification, and it is well recognised by universities. Many of the skills that are taught in applied science are really well matched with how the courses are examined at university in terms of a sort of mixture of exams and coursework. So it would set you up really well for going to university.
Okay, that's excellent. And is it possible to describe how the grades from applied science compare with grades from the individual science subjects?
Yes, Mrs. Presswood, would you like to answer that question?
So our grades in applied science actually match the same UCAS points that you get for your AS and your A-level grades in the other full A-level sciences.
Okay, thank you. Now, do students need to have done triple science in order to take science A-level? Perhaps Mr. Davies could answer that one for us.
Thank you, Miss. Well, that's a no, they don't. We have a mixture of pupils who've taken triple science and pupils who've taken the trilogy science, which is what we call the double science. And we often get a 50-50 split. You get the occasional advantage if you've done triple science. Every now and again, I teach the physics A-level, and there are the odd subject, Boyle's law, circular motion, where you get a bit of a head start on the A-level if you've done the triple science, but I always make that clear to pupils, and I always kind of teach it saying, right, let's assume that you've not got a knowledge of this, and it acts as a recap for those who've done triple science, and it's new content to those who've done trilogy science. And really, we haven't seen any pattern in the results at all. We've had great results from people who've studied both at GCSE.
Okay, that's super. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Prestwood, I'm being asked a question about coursework on applied science. So, how much of the course is coursework?
So we do 4 modules over the 2 years, and there are 2 modules which are portfolio or course-based modules. So we do 1 in year 12 and 1 in year 13.
Okay, thank you. Now, this question does come up quite a bit. I'm not sure how you'll answer it, but are science A levels difficult? Dr. Kellaway.
Well, I don't think there is any such thing as an easy A level. There are certain aspects of all the science A levels that are harder. I would say that in biology, one of the harder things is the level of precision that's needed in terms of the language that you have to use. But I'm sure that there'll be other difficulties. Mrs. Weeks, for chemistry, what would you say would be some of the more difficult things?
Hello. Yes, more difficult things. I would say there's a little bit of maths in some of the A levels, but we have quite small class sizes, so we have a lot of support. You get individual help and nobody gets left behind. I would say that chemistry and all the other science A levels are no harder really than any other A level at all. And we do give a lot of support to pupils if they are finding it tricky.
That's super, thank you. Now, whilst we've got you, Mrs. Weeks, we've got some questions for you. People are asking questions about practical work in chemistry, and as a subset of that, somebody wants to know if you get to blow things up.
Well, we do have quite a bit of practical work in chemistry. It is always quite fun, and yes, we do a few explosions. Yes, we do nicely controlled explosions, always in a nice, safe way, but it is quite practical based as a course. Yes, so if you enjoy practical work, then this is for you.
If it wasn't for maths, I'd be tempted to say that sounds like the best fun subject. Anyway, a question about physics, probably for Mr. Davis. People are asking whether you need to take maths with physics, whether there's a lot of maths in physics.
So two separate questions there. Do you need to take maths along with physics is a no. And is there a lot of maths in physics is a yes, I would say. What I usually say to pupils in year 11 is you don't have to love maths to do physics, but you can't be afraid of it, because there are certain areas of maths you're going to need to be pretty good at. For example, the algebra you'll need to be strong on. You're going to be using a fair amount of trigonometry as you go along as well. There are other aspects, and we use very little of the statistics, and we use very little of transformations of coordinates and things like that. But the parts we use quite a lot, I would say. So yes, you need to be confident in your maths, let's say, but you don't need to do maths A level.
Okay, thank you. And then more about biology, I think, Dr. Kellaway. Somebody's asking, what are the main topics covered in biology?
One of the great things about biology is that every time you go on to study it at a higher level, you get to do lots of different things, but just in more depth. So what you will discover is that we cover everything that we cover at GCSE pretty much, but just in more detail. And I think that it's really interesting when you can see, what really happens in respiration, what really happens in photosynthesis, what does a cell membrane actually look like. So there's so much more to it than we teach you at GCSE, so much more depth, and that's what makes biology such an amazing and interesting subject.
Thank you. And Mrs. Prestwood, do students have to be strong in all three of the science disciplines in order to do well at applied science?
We do cover all three sciences in Unit 1, which they study in Year 12. But as Mrs. Weeks has said, we have very small groups and we have a lot of support in place to help students if that is not your strength. The advantage of applied science is that the exam that you do at the end of Unit 1, all three grades are added together to give you a final grade. So if you're not particularly strong in one of the sciences, the other sciences will help to pull your grade up.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, a general question that's coming through, I think, across the board for all the science disciplines, do people get set a lot of homework?
Again, I think one of the great things about science is how well structured we have made the course. So we are really good at supporting our students to make sure that they can make that leap from GCSE to A level. So the homework or independent study is really well set out, so you know exactly what you've got to do each week, and your teachers will give you lots of advice on the best way to approach that work. You will have regular milestone assessments so that you can see how well you are doing. You'll get feedback on your work regularly as well. So again, that really helps to support you to move from GCSE to A level with the help of your teachers. So yes, there's lots of work, but that work is going to really help you to achieve your best.
That sounds excellent. Now I can see another question that's coming on the Q&A. It's specifically about physics, but I wonder if it's worth answering for all of the sciences. It says, what grade would I need to achieve to get into A-level physics?
Well, we keep this common across all three sciences, that we would say that if you're taking the trilogy science, you need to be scoring a minimum grade of 6.6 because you get a double grade. It reflects its double science. If you're taking the triple science, then you would need, if you wanted to take physics, a 6 in the physics, plus we say a 6 in one of the other science subjects, so that effectively for It makes it a fair comparison between the double and the triple science, that you effectively need 2 6s in the sciences.
Lovely, thank you. Now, again, a general question that's come through. How do students make the choice about whether they should study applied science or a specific science? What are the factors they should consider? How do they make that decision?
Well, although I don't get to teach the applied science, I am an absolute major applied science course. So I would say that if you have a particular science that you love and you really want to study a science, so you love biology, and of course you wouldn't, then yeah, biology would be a great subject for you. If you are thinking that you need a science to go on to university because you perhaps want to study something in healthcare or something in sport, then actually applied science is a brilliant course for you because it definitely counts as a science A-level. And I've spent a lot of time looking at university courses recently, so it definitely will count. It covers all 3 sciences, and as I said, the way that it is examined will really set you up well for your studies. So I would suggest that perhaps you talk to your science teachers. They will be able to give you some advice on which of the pathways would be best for you.
That's great. We still have questions, but we're out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you all 4 of you for giving up your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good evening.
As with the other subjects, if you still have questions you'd like to ask, please speak to a teacher or send them through to us. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Leach now, who will take us forwards.
Lovely. Thank you, Miss Schofield. I'd like to introduce Miss Close. Miss Close, have you joined us this evening? Are you there?
I am indeed.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Good evening to you, and thank you for your time this evening. I just wanted to start with a couple of questions, obviously, as head of a larger role, but overseeing the media side of things. I just wanted to ask, really, it was a question that I always ask myself, let alone the students asking it. What's the difference between the 2 courses in terms of the media and the digital media that you offer?
Okay, so the media is an A-level course and is 70% examined and 30% coursework, whereas the digital media CTEC is 50-50. And the CTEC is modular. So it means that you sit an exam in year 12 and you complete a coursework project in year 12, and then you complete another exam in year 13 and another coursework project in year 13. And you kind of find out as you go along how you're doing, because the moderator will come in and check our marking. And at the end of year 12, you will have a half A-level grade in the bag.
Lovely, thank you. And on that subject, I heard you mention the term CTEC. Is the CTEC digital media an A-level?
It's not an A-level, but it does carry, in fact, slightly more UCAS points on the half course than an AS level does. And it carries exactly the same amount of UCAS points for the full 2-year course as an A-level course does.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Now, I think the question that comes up, especially for those subjects that students choose in years 10 and 11, they're not always subjects they've always studied. So can you study the digital media or media studies if you haven't studied it at Key Stage 4?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, our current year 13, about half of the students who are taking A-level media didn't study it at GCSE. And in fact, 2 of our potential A-star students didn't take it at Key Stage 4 and are really enjoying it and looking to go on to take them at university. The same with the CTEC. One of our students who is performing particularly well didn't take it and wished that she had actually at Key Stage 4. So yeah, absolutely. You don't need to have taken it at Key Stage 4 to study at Key Stage 5.
Brilliant. So really accessible, which is brilliant to hear. Obviously, 2 media courses on offer. If you really loved media, is it possible to take both of them at the same time?
Unfortunately not. There's too much of a crossover between the media A-level and the digital media CTEC. However, the film A-level, we would happily take you alongside the media or the digital media CTEC. So you could take film and media A-level, or you could take digital media CTEC and A-level film, but you can't take the two medias.
Lovely, thank you. And you just mentioned the film there, which brings us nicely onto the new A-level that's being offered. What's the difference between A-level media and A-level film, which obviously is new?
So A-level film is a much more in-depth look at one industry in particular, and I'm going to just say just how excited I am to be able to offer this. I've wanted to offer it for about 3 years now. It's an opportunity for you to get a really close study at the film industry, really, to look at the difference between Hollywood in the past and the British film industry today, to have a little bit of a look at experimental film. Many of the films are on the image behind me that we hope that you will be studying next year. So yes, media is more of a look at a broader variety of different industries. We look at radio, magazines, we look at online. So Zoella is a particularly popular topic to research, to spend time with, and we look also at newspaper covers. So there's a nice crossover there with politics as well, because we look at the moment we're focused on Brexit. In the past we've looked at the presidential election. So yeah, much more wider range of different industries on the media A-level.
Thank you. A real insight into that. Lots of people would assume it's just watching films, but that's
Mr. Leach.
It's a lot more than that, isn't it, Mr. Leach? It's a lot more than that. So thank you very much. That is that's just the end of our time slot there. So we really do thank you for your evening. Any other questions that you have over media, feel free to come and find you, I suppose, Mrs. Close. But thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. I can see Mr. Slark. Yes, Mr. Slark is waiting to discuss business studies. Mr. Slark, hello. Can we hear you, Mr. Slark? We cannot. We will give you a minute.
Mr. Leach, while Mr. Slark tries to sort his microphone out, you could ask about economics, and I can help out with that.
Excellent. So I'll start with a few questions on economics while we wait. Mr. Slark, we will come back to you in just a moment. So firstly, lots of students won't know what economics is, and often a question that comes through is, what exactly is economics?
So I've been teaching economics this year to A-level, and I've absolutely loved it. It's a challenging course, but it is so current. We look at two aspects: microeconomics and macroeconomics, and it's basically how money makes the world go round. So, for example, Year 12s have studied so far unemployment this week. We've looked at things like international trade. Oops, sounds like the microphone is now working. We've looked at how governments manage the economy, and then we look at individual markets as well, how prices affect our behaviour, how they affect the company's behaviour. So it's a fascinating subject that really takes in, what's happening at the moment with the pandemic, how that's affecting the economy, the demand, the supply. I think it's a subject that I think students really can get their teeth into. There's a mathematical side to it, there's analysing figures, and it explores everything that's around us in the world.
Brilliant. That's thank you very much for that, Mr. Ballantyne. And we'll come back to some more economics in a minute. And there's an interesting question that's just come through on our live Q&A which is the link is, what's the difference between business studies and economics? Mr. Slark, I think we can now hear you. Could you answer that for us? Could you give us an insight into what the difference is between the two, business studies and economics, please?
So business studies is more looking at the external environment on strategic decision making, whereas economics is more about looking at what governments decide to do with the resources that they have and how that affects companies.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that. This is quite a common question that does occur. So I wanted to come back to your area of business. What's the difference between the two courses? We introduced the CTEC business this year. What's the difference between the business A level and the business CTEC? Sorry.
So business A level is more the traditional A level, so it's the assessments. The assessments are different. So obviously with the A level business, at the end of year 13, students sit 3 exams, and the new CTEC business is a more vocational qualification, and the assessment is more it's coursework and exam based.
Brilliant. So there's a little bit more accessible potentially in the terms of additional coursework to help support your grade.
Yeah, and it's more practical. So you look at, the students would look at real life companies. So we might look at doing some market research and a marketing campaign. And I would choose like a business that they could look at locally, so it's more practical.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. And finally, on the business side of things, can you study both business and economics at the same time if they fall in different option blocks?
Yes, you can. Yes, they do complement each other. Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Banstein, can I come back to you on a few of the economics questions that have come through as well, please? What other subjects are suitable to study alongside an A-level economics? Is a question that has come up.
You don't have to do maths, but studying an AS in core maths would be really useful, and Mrs. Avery Doyle is going to talk about the AS in core maths later and how that complements subjects like economics. There is an element of essay writing to it, so a good level of English, but there are multiple choice questions in there. So I think it could be part of a broad-based set of subjects. So if you took economics, English and maths, that would work really, really well. But equally, mix it up, history, economics and politics, also any combination would work.
Lovely, thank you. And then there's a final question that's just come through. The CTEC business, what's the split between the coursework and the exam, Mr. Slark?
So in year 12, you can't just do an AS in it if you wanted to, so students can just do an AS. So in year 12 they have 2 exams, and then in year 13, so if you do the whole qualification, so the 1 A level, the students will sit 3 pieces of coursework. So there's 2 exams and 3 pieces of coursework if they do one whole A level.
Lovely, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of that time slot there. We really do appreciate your time. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the start, Mr. Slark, but thank you very much for your time this evening. Any other questions, like I say, do get in touch with the school and we will get them over to Mr. Slark for them to be answered. I can see we're very colourful. Mrs. Hobbs, hello, good evening.
Good evening, can you hear me?
We can indeed, with a wonderfully colourful background that you have there. Mrs. Hobbs, as head of art, I've got loads of art questions. I'm going to fly straight in if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Firstly, what grades in art are you expected to achieve to be able to study the A level, and how important is that to achieve?
So we asked for a minimum requirement of a grade 5, because within that it would show that you're able to develop your contextual references, your critical and analytical understanding, and we do require a certain level of like English and writing skills, for instance, to reflect upon work of others, and then for you to also reflect upon your work as well and to make those comparative links. So the minimum of a grade 5. If you haven't studied art and design before, or one of the art disciplines, then we do also ask students if they have a portfolio of work that we can look at, because some students have got a passion for art and design or creative type mediums, and they may not have chosen it in year 9 for their GCSE options, and it just means that if you do have that personal connection, then you could still be a viable student to go forward with that.
Lovely, thank you very much. So very accessible again, lots having not necessarily studied art at GCSE. Can the textile students that study textiles at GCSE, are they able to take the art A level as well?
Yes, so the A level course is AQA and it's an unendorsed course, so it's art, craft and design. So within that, all students will experience several different types of mediums, whether it's clay, wire, printing techniques and so on, but those that are coming from a textiles background can tailor those modules and play to their strengths. So although it's under an unendorsed umbrella, those students can have a heavy textile influence within their key body of work, so that if they're looking to go on to further education in interior or fashion design, their portfolio of work would support that, but also show that they have skills in other areas as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And we often have questions with regards to the coursework. Obviously, art is about your ability to produce art. What's the split between the coursework and the exam?
Okay, so the AQA course, so it follows on really nicely from the GCSE courses that we offer for both art and art textiles. So in terms of the assessment objectives and the terminology that's used there, it should be really familiar to students. And it follows the same process as GCSE as well. So we offer 60% coursework, which runs from the September of year 12 through to the January of year 13. That's concluded with a 3,000 word essay to support the body of work. And then the exam unit starts in the February of year 13 through to the May of year 13, and that's worth 40%. And that's concluded with a 15-hour exam, of which the students would have done all the preparatory work, all of the research, sampling, practicing, teacher guidance throughout that period of the exam paper, so that when they go into that exam, they're fully prepared for what they're going to be doing. And that there's no surprises on the day. So they would have had advance notice of the exam questions or the exam themes, and then that's concluded at the end of year 13. So it's 60 coursework, 40% exam.
So lots of preparation, lots. They'll be more than ready to sit the exam when it comes around. And very quickly, just last question, which is obviously on the new course of photography that's being introduced this year. Firstly, where can photography A-level take us, and what equipment will the students need if they want to take it?
Okay, so for both disciplines, for the art and design and photography, the creative industry is one of the fastest growing industries within the UK, and now more than ever, where we're connecting with digital media, is even more important. So in terms of photography, you could look at creative or editorial photography, the film industry. So again, it could link quite nicely in with media studies and the new film course that's being offered there. And also the digital media and graphic communication photography links really nicely with those also. So it's a new course for us, something we're really excited about, and again it complements other subjects that are currently being offered on the curriculum as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Mrs. Hobbs. We are out of time, so I'm going to pass over back to Mr. Ballantyne, who is going to introduce drama. Thank you so much, Ms. Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. You know, you're a minute over, Mr. Leach, but I'm not going to hold it against you. Can I welcome, live from the drama studio or elsewhere, Mrs. Ross? Are you there, Mrs. Ross?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Okay, first question about A-level drama. Can I do set and acting or design, and can I direct?
Okay, so yes, but the answer to both is yes, but you can only be assessed on either the design elements, so set, lighting, costume, or sound, and you would only be able to be assessed on sort of acting as well. The directing comes into your devising units. You basically become a director. That's the key difference between sort of GCSE work and A-level work, is you direct yourself, you direct your groups, but the assessments themselves can be done in all of those design elements. And we often have students take, for the two practical elements of the course, acting for one and then a design option for the other. So actually it's whatever you want to do, but also the course itself allows you to understand all elements of drama, because you need to be able to write about the decisions you've made and hypothetical ideas in a written exam situation.
So at the Willink, we have perhaps one of the best drama studios in Berkshire, I would say. What element of practical is there? How much practical is there? How much theory is there? How much do the students use that facility that we have?
Okay, so we use the studio as much as possible, and basically it is a huge studio. It's got so much equipment, it has so much potential. We use it for workshops at the beginning, so that at the beginning of the course we are exploring all of our practitioners, about 10 in total, and that requires a lot of practical work. But a lot of that practical work is backed up with seminars. So we will be in our drama classroom, which can also double as a small practical room when needed. The actual studio time itself is, we try to split it so it's sort of 50-50, but when it's coming up to performance exams, we like to ask that the sixth form can use that space more often when they're preparing for their exams. The actual split on the course itself is 60% is made up of the 2 practical elements, but obviously within that there are written elements that go along, and 40% is the sort of written paper. But everything that they write about we have explored practically, so the studio is a wonderful space to work in, both for students and for ourselves.
So if the students enjoy drama, or maybe they haven't done it before, actually that's the question, can you do it without having done GCSE drama? That was the question.
Yes, we've had students, quite a few students, really successfully take the A level not having done the GCSE. We tend to find people who have maybe they've done it through amateur dramatics outside of school and just never chose it at GCSE. We tend to find that they need to read up on what we did at GCSE, but actually we cover those practitioners again. It's just that the other students in the class might be experts at that moment, but it doesn't take them long to kind of gather the work, etc. And the written element is different to an English paper, but actually as long as the students take the advice that we give them, they do really well at the end of the course.
Final question, Mrs. Ross. How will drama get me into university? What skills will I learn that I can apply to my university entrance?
Okay, so it completely depends on what you choose to do. Obviously, you could take drama because you want to go into the performing arts industry, and it's an obvious choice for people who want to go to drama school or even go to university to study a drama degree, to do drama therapy, but also the design elements. But often we find our students aren't wanting to go into that industry, but the fact that they have worked creatively, they've done problem solving, they've developed their leadership skills, not only that, but their confidence. They often find that that really suits them for most of the courses people have attempted to go on to, but actually they do really well in interviews because of the fact that they are performers, essentially.
Mrs. Ross, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to cross over now to medieval France, where Mrs. Edney is in an enchanted village. Can you hear me, Mrs. Edney?
I can indeed. Hello from my enchanted village.
Mrs. Edney is our head of modern foreign languages. Which languages do we offer at A level, Mrs. Edney?
We offer French, Spanish and German A level.
And how much of a big step up is it from GCSE?
I think with any step from GCSE to A level, there is a big step. But the nice thing is we have everything very structured. So we prepare students well in advance to be able to transition successfully from GCSE to A level. That starts with the transition work, which obviously all subjects offer to students. And then once students have successfully completed their transition work, we do check it on their return to year 12. And then we work with them with that transition then. So we help students to succeed with learning all the new vocab, dealing with the more complex vocab and grammar. So there is a transition, but it is very well supported.
How do students develop their language in terms of their spoken language? Are there any native speakers that help out with sixth form students?
Absolutely, we're incredibly lucky in languages. We often have foreign language assistants. So this year we currently have a Spanish foreign language assistant, a French foreign language assistant, and soon there will be somebody working with our students in our German classes as well. We're very lucky. We also speak target language in the classroom, and it's a very fully immersive environment at the Willink.
What sort of content will students study, and how's it different to GCSE?
Oh, it's a very rich course because students will study a film and a piece of literature in the target language, which students find very rewarding, accessing literature and films in a different language.
Tell him to turn his camera on.
They also study anything from culture of the country, the country that they're studying, history, politics, and just various aspects of the society of the countries that they're studying. So, for example, in Spanish, we would be learning about family. In French, we'd be learning about marginalisation. And in German, there's some lovely courses on like the EU, Berlin. And throughout all of these, we do also do politics.
Final question, Mrs. Edney. Are there any trips at A-level for language
Yeah,
students?
we're very lucky. We've got Mr. Debois, who's our trips pioneer, and he's very much committed to including sixth formers in the trips that we run, especially those key stage 4 trips. Most recently, we had students go to Malaga on the Cologne trip, and I know that he's committed to continuing with those as well and looking at opportunities for the French students too.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Edney. The reason you look surprised at the start of that is because I got the timings wrong, didn't I?
Yes.
Poor Mr. Jubb was waiting in the wings, and I need to introduce you now, Mr. Jubb. Mr. Jubb, representing PE and the Olympic nations tonight. Welcome. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you, Ines. Sorry, Mr. Valentine.
That's all right, Mr. Jubb. What's the difference between GCSE and A-level PE?
So main difference being there are 3 papers for A-level rather than the 2 at GCSE. Equally, there's, for the theory side of things, there's a greater depth and more areas covered. For example, we start to look at energy systems, the Olympics, hence the background, leadership, recovery, fluid mechanics, and all that side of things as well. Practically, it's 1 sport rather than the 3 that would normally be studied at GCSE.
And what sort of practical element is there to it? Can you give us some examples over the last couple of years of what practical sports students have done and what that might involve at A-level?
Yeah, so lots of students obviously use the main sort of team sports. So you've got your netball, your football, rugby. Equally, we have some swimmers, some athletes, and essentially it entails participating regularly outside of school and keeping a log of all of that participation. So yeah, so that's the practical side of things.
And we've had a lot of students go on to study PE or related subjects at university. Can you give us some examples of what our students do with PE after A-level, please?
Yeah, so obviously quite a few go on to higher education, as you said, and go into the PE and sports science degrees. Equally, we've had a number that have gone on to do physiotherapy, and last year I think we had 2 physiotherapists and a couple of students that went on to Loughborough University, which is like the top university for sports. So yeah, pretty good at moving students on to higher education, but equally can be used as an A-level. And because of the nature of PE, you've got that element of teamwork, which is great going into other professions as well. And also they have to do a talk, which is about their main sport, but actually entails it's about a 20-minute talk about their sport and how they might improve somebody. So again, it develops those skills as well.
It says here, there's a question that says, what does the talk part, EAPI, of the coursework involve? What does EAPI stand for?
Yeah, so that's the 20-minute talk that I've just sort of spoken about. But essentially what it involves is they'll watch a performance, and from that performance they will pick out the main strengths and the main weaknesses of that performance. They'll prioritise the main weakness and then develop an action plan for that main weakness to try and improve it.
What new topics will I study at PE that I haven't done at GCSE, and do I need to have done it at GCSE to do it at A-level?
You don't necessarily need to have done it at GCSE. Obviously, it would be the preferred option, but it's not essential. If they've done their science as well and got a 5 in their science, that's great. And we've had a number of students that have come through that haven't done haven't done GCSE PE before, and they've gone on and done well. In terms of new topics, you've got the bits and pieces that I sort of said earlier about energy systems, Olympics and things like that, but also violence in sport and drugs in sport. So why do the top level athletes take sports? What are the punishments for it? And how do they re-educate after having done that? I don't know whether this question is a real one, but it has come through. I don't know if Mr. Leach has published it, but it says, can you study weightlifting at A level? Is that as in, can you use it as a sport? I think so, yeah. Okay, yeah, I don't think it's on our list of approved activities at the minute, no. So you mentioned a few. What other activities would be on the approved list? So it's very similar to the GCSE spec, but it's got all the main sort of team sports that you can think of. So your footballs, your netballs, your rugbies, your hockeys, your basketballs. Equally, you've then also got individual activities like swimming and athletics. I think cycling might be on there. I think skiing is still on there, and horse riding as well. Mr. Jubb, thank you very much for telling us all about PE A level. I'm going to hand you over now to Mrs. Schofield, who has some more teachers standing by. Mrs. Schofield.
Hello again. We have 2 of our English teachers tonight. We've got Mrs. McLaren, who's head of department, and Mr. Morgan, both of whom teach A level extensively. Do you want to just say hello, folks?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming through loud and clear, both of you. That's super. OK, I'm going to start with a question for English language. People want to know, what is English language A level? Is it just an extension of GCSE? Ms. McLaren.
I would say no, not really. Obviously, some of the skills do overlap from GCSE into the A level itself, but the A level language is completely different to anything that students would have seen before. It's very much a study of linguistics, which is like the science of language, and you go into lots of different facets of that, including child language acquisition, so how children learn how to speak, and within that you then have to study lots of linguistic levels and thinking about how they formulate very basic forms of language all the way up to when they're starting to form more complicated syntactical arrangements and other things. So it is actually very different to GCSE language.
OK, and what sort of subjects does English language fit well with?
Lots of different subjects. Just some of the that I can think of as psychology, sociology, any of the social sciences would be great. Humanities, MFL, because of obviously the crossover with linguistic language levels and understanding that, even maths to a degree. So I would say pretty much anything, really.
OK, that's super. And then is that it? Do you just study English, or can it go further afterwards? Where can it take you?
Well, I'd argue that it could take you pretty much anywhere, but the skills that you learn in English language are so relatable to many different careers. Some that we've got on top of my head, I can think of anything in communication, so marketing, speech and language therapy, law, journalism, even teaching, if you fancy it.
And who wouldn't? I have to say, if you get students as marvellous as ours, everybody would want to be a teacher, that's for sure. I'm still sticking with English language. There's a question here asking what sort of topics are covered. What's a rough outline of the course?
Okay, so in year 12, start by looking at, on one side of the course, child language acquisition. So I mentioned that just a moment ago, but how children learn how to speak and how they start to learn how to communicate. Then they cover things like diversity in language, so how different social groups speak very differently. Language change, so how language has changed from Shakespearean times to the modern day and even before that. Representation and language discourses,
And yeah, there's lots of different areas of study, and you also have, I don't know if this is one of your questions that I might be covering already, but there is also a creative writing element to the course as well. So 20% of the A-level actually is a creative writing component, where students have the opportunity to do a little bit of creative writing themselves, whilst trying to adhere to some of those language conventions of a genre. So they might write, for example, a speech, and they have to manipulate their language to write that speech, and then they have to write an analytical commentary about their own speech and why they did what they did. So it's studying language across many different topics and different avenues, and then trying to apply it themselves in a piece of coursework.
Okay, that's super. A question for Mr. Morgan, I think. Somebody here asking whether they have to study grammar as part of English language.
Yes, absolutely. We love grammar. It's probably more accurate to say you have to study grammars and pluralize that, because grammar isn't something which is just simply one thing. So the best way to think about that is sometimes you need to refer to a certain word, in which case you'd be looking at word level grammar. So you'd be talking about, for example, prepositions. And you'd be talking about verbs, and then you get different types of verbs. So you get dynamic verbs, stative verbs, auxiliary verbs, and so on. That's where the overlap that Mr. McLaren was talking about with MFL comes in, I would say. But sometimes you might want to talk about a particular part of a word. For example, if you've got girl and then you've got girls, that plural S, that's called a morpheme. So we'd be looking at morphemic grammar, right the way up to sentence level grammar, phrasal grammar, up to whole text. So yes, you do, but not in a kind of staid tweed jacket type way where, you know, we're kind of dusting off the old grammar books. It's very, very dynamic. It's looking at what's happening in texts, and it's using grammar as a tool to actually analyze text and analyze language, rather than just learning it for its own sake.
It's fantastic. And what I love is when we ask one of our teachers a question that could sound dry, and the answer that we get back is absolutely full of enthusiasm. That's brilliant. If you want to know about German grammar sometime in an English lesson, ask Mr. Morgan about that as well. Right, it's time for us to move on to English literature, but we keep our current two speakers. Back to Mrs. McLaren. If we're doing English literature, if a student's doing English literature, can they do creative writing?
The short answer is no. There is no element of creative writing in English literature. It is an analytical course where we are studying text and writing evaluatively and analytically about what we read. So no, language is one for you if you want to do creative writing.
That's very clear. And then Mr. Morgan again, people asking for literature, will they have to read a lot? Will they have to write a lot of essays? Can you give us an idea of what's involved?
Again, the short answer to that is yes, you're studying English literature, so you're looking at text. However, if you're having visions of piles and piles of books upon each other, novels such as, you know, Doorsteps, such as A War and Peace and things like that, no, you study a range of texts really. So you do some novels in prose, and in fact the course is organised into genre. So the first course that you do is drama, where you'll be looking at a Shakespeare play, and then you'll be looking at another possibly more contemporary play, or possibly older, going back to Victorian times. And then you do a prose paper which looks at two novels, which is one kind of modern text, and again one which is a little bit older, going back to pre-19th century. And then you do a poetry paper where you look at some contemporary poetry by people that are still alive, which is a bit of a blessing. And then you've got a choice really, and it's one of the beauties of this course that I think the options that you have according to the group will tailor the course to you, because we have quite a lot of options from that pre-19th century poetry to actually choose from. So we could go right the way back to Chaucer, to the 1400s.
I think we've had a technical hitch there with Mr. Morgan. That's a really good description of the various texts and so on. Mrs. McLaren, I'm going to bring a question over to you. You talked to us about where English language leads to next. Is it similar?
Yes, it is actually. When you study English literature, you also can go into careers for communication. Did you hear any of what I just said? Okay, so yes, the answer. Okay, all right. Sorry, just because I didn't see the live come up. So yes, anything communication, so very similar to English language, things like marketing, law, journalism, anything like that. But of course, English literature is seen as a facilitating subject. So universities look quite favourably on English literature, which means that whatever you decide to study at university, English literature will be a good string to your bow.
It was Mrs. Schofield who managed to leave the call there, but so I'll take over while she reconnects. Question for English literature has just come in. What books will we be studying in English literature? Who would like to answer that question? Mr. Morgan?
I'll have a go if Mrs. McLaren doesn't mind. You know what? That's subject to options, really. Like I say, there's quite a vast array of texts that we can actually study on this course, and whereas we tend to go with, because we don't know the group so well when we start, we tend to go with you know, our Shakespeare and our probably Oscar Wilde or something like Tennessee Williams with our play until we get to know the group. When it comes to the prose options, you've got so many. So this year, for example, what we did was we gave the class a list of the text, asked them to go away and look at them, and then we did a secret ballot as to what we were going to do. So we really are flexible. So at the moment, I can tell you this year, we're certainly doing for prose The Handmaid's Tale and Frankenstein. For poetry, with the current year 13, we're studying the Romantic Poets, and we're doing the Contemporary Anthology. But that could change because we do have the option to do that. And we've got the knowledge and the expertise within the department as well to teach across that whole chronology of English literature.
Mr. Ballantyne, you are mute.
I thought
Miss on mute. Yeah, that was me on mute, wasn't it? I'm going to hand over then to Mr. Leach, who's going to. Oh, Mr. Fry's bought the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Fry. We're all back. We're all back. Is it working now?
Yeah.
Mr. Leach, over to you to speak to the maths department.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Ballantyne. That's the first one. So that's taken just over 2 hours to get to that, so I'm quite impressed with that. So thank you, Mrs. Avery Doyle and Mr. John, for joining us this evening. If you've lasted this long, then you obviously still want to study maths. Firstly, I'd just like to talk, we've got maths, further maths and core maths to discuss. So I'm going to bring Mrs. Avery Doyle in first. Firstly, Mrs. Avery Doyle, what is core maths and what does it involve?
So core maths is an AS qualification, and it is a subject where we look at more statistical data analysis, some looking at different readings, looking at a lot of financial maths. And the idea is a 1-year course where the students will put the maths that they've learned at GCSE and then link it into more contextual real life scenarios in a year-long course, in a nutshell.
Lovely, thank you. And what kind of topics are discussed?
So we do a really interesting topic on personal finance. We do a topic on statistical and data analysis. We do one on risk analysis. And then we do a general one on looking at data and bodies of text and how we pick out information, arguments, and look at different types of ways of arguing, ways of presenting data and information. So sort of 4 main areas across number, statistics, and then real life scenarios.
Excellent. Sounds very real world related. Yeah. And there's this kind of a 2-part question. Firstly, what's the qualification that comes with it? And secondly, what other subjects would complement the study of core maths?
So it's a year-long course, so you'd get an AS qualification from it, and you'd complete it throughout your year 12. So it would be alongside potentially 2 or 3 other subjects or 3 A levels. And then the second part of that question was, Mr. Leach?
What subjects would complement it?
Oh, so definitely subjects such as geography, psychology, English, history, anything where you're analysing data, using statistics or having to use sources would be appropriate for it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Real insight into a subject that students are really interested in, but don't
Yeah.
know a amount about, which is really good.
Definitely.
So I'd like to bring Mr. John in, firstly on some of the questions about maths. Now, maths is obviously a subject, A-level maths is a step up from GCSE, but how big is the step and how much harder is it?
Sorry, I just missed the first part of that. My computer froze on me. Sorry, can you repeat that question?
That's fine. So it's a step up from GCSE, but how big is the step from GCSE to A-level?
Okay, I think if you are one of the students who are going to get grade 7, probably 8 or 9, those who are in set 1, maybe set 2 at GCSE, the initial step up isn't that big. If you're coming from slightly lower down and you've just got in with a grade 6, I think it's widespread, well known that the step up is considerable, and that can be dealt with by lots and lots of extra practice and independent study.
Lovely, thank you. And what's covered? What sort of things? What are the interesting topics that are covered? Interesting for maths teachers, you love them all, but what's the interesting topics that are covered for in your maths courses?
Well, bearing in mind we've only got a few minutes, and I could go on for hours, but clearly a love of algebra is necessary because it's predominantly algebra through the 3 main topics, which is pure maths, which is statistics, and mechanics, which is the study of moving things. And the underlying thing with that whole thing of them is the fact that there's just so much algebra. So you've got to be adept, you've got to love algebra.
Thank you. And Miss Avery Doyle, just very quickly on maths, are the classes set when you get to A-level? Because obviously maths is a very popular subject. Are the classes set when we get to A-level?
Yeah, we do set the classes in maths just to make sure that those, as Mr. John said, about the different grades that come in. There is a wide variety. It's very popular, Willink, which is fantastic. So to make sure actually that the support is there for the different ranges of abilities, we do set across in maths.
Thank you. And lastly, just going to talk back to Mr. John about further maths. Students are interested in what it is in terms of how it differs from normal maths and what it involves.
Okay, so it broadens the knowledge of maths that you take at A-level maths, and it certainly deepens it because essentially you're doing double the amount of maths. So you've got to be a hardcore maths fan to enjoy it, and often we need we do need at least a grade 7, ideally grade 8 or 9, to be able to really access the content and really enjoy it. It's truly beautiful, further maths.
Invisible numbers and things like that, as far as that seems to be the topic.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Imaginary numbers, but invisible is close.
They're imaginary, they're all invisible to me. And what subjects complement further maths, or what subjects would you suggest would be studied alongside further maths? Okay, so maths and further maths go together. 2 separate A levels, but they obviously go hand in hand. Computer science is a big one because you learn things in further maths that will enhance your knowledge of computer science if you're going forward into computers, such as complex numbers, which you've just lightly dealt with, imaginary numbers, and matrices, which go to the basis of all computer programming. So biology, lots of students have studied biology and further maths and have gone on to do natural sciences, and of course physics is a natural fit as well. So yeah, it fits with lots of others. Thank you, and a real insight into a subject that lots of students are keen on, but it seems to it's quite a big jump up from that GCSE math, isn't it, the further maths topics? It is. So thank you. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Avery Doyle and Mr. John, for your time this evening. Thank you for sticking around until 8:15 on a Thursday evening, and I will pass back to Mr. Ballantyne now to conclude the evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leach, and thank you to all the teachers. I can see that there are still 50 people plus parents, so perhaps maybe 60, 70 people still watching. Well done if you've got this far. If you want to watch it all again, it will be up on our website in the next couple of days. I really hope that your questions have been answered tonight. You've seen the enthusiasm, the passion of our teachers, just how much our students enjoy the sixth form, and I really hope that you will consider it when making your choice for post-16 next year after your GCSEs. I will hand over final words from Mrs. Schofield, who has, despite her technical problems, arrived back.
I am back, different background, but that's okay. I just wanted to say, I hope what you've all seen tonight is just what a fantastic place our sixth form is. I could not be more proud of our sixth form students who started the evening so well. And I'm hoping that everybody sitting out there wishes that they will be in that position. So get your applications lined up. We're looking forward to welcoming you. Sixth form is brilliant and you will thrive in it. Thank you so much for watching. It's been great to know that you're there. Have a lovely evening.